It's not as simple as it seems when looking at the newest 4.1 banners, and this is the best time to understand the whole situation. But first, thanks to Factor for sponsoring today's video. Look, I'll admit it, I suck at cooking, but luckily, Factor can help me go from a miserable chef to a happy eater in just a few minutes thanks to their awesome ready-made meals delivered to your doorstep. Factor meals are nutritious, so you can avoid ordering unhealthy fast food. These meals are chef-prepared, so you can eat well thanks to quality ingredients that are also dietitian approved. Also, you know how intense a gacha gamer's life can get? Well, you can always grab a tasty smoothie for a quick snack, or just heat up and eat chef-quality meal within 2 minutes with no prep or cleanup. And thanks to this, I can focus on grinding those artifact domains and continue crying when defense rolls. But the best part, no matter what food you prefer, they've got keto, low-calorie, vegetarian, and vegan meal options, which means you'll always find something delicious to eat. So make sure to use my link or visit go.factor75.com and use my code shown here for a massive 50% off with free shipping. Just make sure to click the link in the description or scan the QR code with your phone and start living the good food life with Factor. Move aside, Hazo. A brand new pugilist is about to replace you, and his name? Wriothesley or Wriothesley? I don't know, but this dude packs a literal punch. However, there are some things that need to be considered about this 5-star Cryo Catalyst user, whether you're pulling for him or not. First of all, the livestream gave us a really bare bones description of how he works. But basically, you can use his normal and charge attacks as usual, dealing cryo damage, but if you activate his skill, it will enhance these attacks while at the same time, he will also start draining his own health. This kind of works in a similar way compared to Hu Tao's skill, but one cool thing about him is that when he falls below a certain amount of health, he can use his charge attack with enhanced damage. It will not consume any stamina, and it will even heal him. So basically, he fluctuates between losing and gaining health, while at the same time, he can utilize artifacts such as Golden Troop to give him a massive critical rate boost. My question right now is, how reliable are his cryo applications? Because from the looks of it, the skill just provides enhancement, and if we assume his normal attacks share the standard ICD, while the charge attack doesn't have one, will he be one of those characters who drain the stamina bar so fast when spamming the charge attack in order to score melt reactions? Because if that's the case, his survivability will be pretty bad outside of the teams without a proper shielder or healer, since it will be hard to dash as well. Although someone like Hu Tao can easily clear the hardest content in a comp like Double Hydro Pyro. So I'm just wondering if Wriothesley won't have this annoying thing where I have to stare at his red stamina bar. However, I can see some really strong teams with him. For example, Shenhe, Benny, Kazuha could easily amplify his damage by an insane amount, especially if his burst has a nice multiplier or can hit multiple enemies and can cause more than one melt. But two of these characters are literally premium 5 stars, while Benny is almost always wanted by another team. Well, that's where teams like Freeze come in, or he could even be built with an Oven team in mind, which is the Burgeon variant with Toma. And let's not forget that the game finally has a Cryo Catalyst user. That means Frostbearer has finally found its new home, right? Not really. I mean, this weapon was always pretty bad, and the passive isn't a saving grace here. However, I wouldn't dismiss it just yet, and I'll test it out when I'm able to. Overall, I think there are quite a few variables that still make it pretty unclear how good Wriothesley is, especially since a lot of his potential depends on whether he has good cryo application, if he can manage to not hog all the stamina bar to himself, and if the burst actually can hit for a decent amount of damage. Neuvilette feels like what Hydro Traveler should have been. Both of these guys share a very similar kit, except this guy is about 10 times better than the Hydro Squirter. I mean, just look at him. He can move around while channeling his attack instead of being stuck in one place like the Traveler. Basically, Neuvillette's entire playstyle revolves around this massive Hydro laser he shoots out when using his charge attack. And there are a lot of small details that I've managed to catch during the livestream. So first of all, this laser lasts about 3 seconds and it takes about 3 to 4 seconds to charge it up. Now, you might be wondering, you spend this much time just to have some fun for a couple of seconds? Well, here's the interesting part. Both his skill and burst will generate these things called source water droplets that look very similar compared to Hydro Travelers. Neuvilette can pick up these droplets and reduce the time it takes up to charge up the Hydro laser. In fact, I think it becomes near instant when he obtains 3 of the droplets. You can see from the footage here, when his burst generates 6 droplets, only 3 of them are consumed, so he can instantly shoot a laser after the burst, and then after this charge attack repeated more time. With the skill, he can produce 3 droplets, so basically 1 free charged attack included with this package as well. I think this guy is going to be amazing if his damage multipliers are actually good, and he can apply Hydro at least a couple of times when shooting the Hydro laser at the enemies. One hint that we already got from the livestream is that he deals more damage when he has more health, so that's one sign he has passive talents that continue boosting his damage. Essentially, we're looking at about 10 to 11 seconds of on-field time in a single rotation that you'll be able to spend with him, and we really don't have that many on-field Hydro damage dealers besides Child and Ayato. And there's a lot you can do with an on-field Hydro damage dealer. First of all, this opens up to so many different teams you can put Neuvilette in. For example, the classic international comp can easily swap Child or Ayato out and use him instead, since Kazuha and Xiangling will provide enough pyro application for him to cause vapes, unless he can literally vape on every single laser hit, and it deals a ton of hits. But I highly doubt that, because he would be too broken then, and we haven't seen a broken character since Nahida. But yeah, even teams like Nilobloom would love this guy, especially if his Hydro application is good, because then you can easily cause Bloom reactions with Dendro characters, and that means you can build them with the appropriate elemental mastery gear. While in comps like Hyper Bloom, for once Hydro is not just there for application or off-field damage. Neuvilette is the damage dealer here, and you could build some cool comps like Nahida, Cookie, and Beto, since Beto's burst triggers on charge attacks, and the laser is supposedly categorized as charge attack, which would be amazing because Beto's burst also doesn't really trigger that many Hyper Blooms. Another cool team could be Hyperfridge. Previously, Kaya was carrying the torch as the on-field unit for this comp, but now Neuvilette could easily swoop in and take the crown as the strongest Hyperfridge leading unit. And even Freeze teams. I'm really interested to know if he will have a strong synergy with Mona, because her Omen can be prolonged with frozen targets, so imagine getting that massive buff from her while unleashing his laser. Honestly, there's a lot of things that I find exciting about him, although there are a few speculations that make me a bit nervous. Like, for example, will he gain any kind of resistance to interruption while channeling the Hydro laser? There's nothing worse than getting stomped and interrupted by enemies, and this would force people to build teams that have a shielder. Another huge risk is the burst. Quite a few teams are made up of just him as the only Hydro unit, and I can see from the livestream footage his skill generates 4 particles, which is pretty good, but he might need a lot of outside help if his burst ends up costing a lot. And he needs this burst to fully utilize his kit. Heck, 2 of the lasers can only be instantly shot when he picks up the 6 droplets. Overall, I think Neuvillette's potential is pretty big, especially if he ends up dealing a ton of damage with his entire kit and can cause reactions good amount of times. It's funny when you think about it. He feels like an Archon because he shares so many similarities with the Traveler, and yet he's just a character that a lot of people might pass up in order to pull for the true Hydro Archon. But should you skip on him or not? That's an entirely different question. So let's talk about it in this next part. So, the 4.1 update will feature 4 different 5-star characters. Neuvilette with Hu Tao in the first phase, and Wriothesley with Venti in the second phase. I think it's a bit unfortunate that Neuvilette is in the first phase because I believe he has some serious potential if everything works out for the best. Because if he was in the second phase banners, we could at least see the next character showcases on the 4.2 livestream. But this will be a privilege for those who are yet undecided if they want to pull for Wriothesley. And I think when it comes to Hu Tao or Venti, the answer is pretty simple. Both of them are viable. Venti's suction from the burst is still relevant to this day, even if a lot of the final Abyss chambers have bosses where they just ignore this tiny black hole. While Hu Tao is a serious damage dealer, but she does require Xingqiu or Yelan to achieve peak performance. Honestly, out of all these 4 characters, it heavily depends on your account's roster, but if I had to pick the flavor of this update, then it would have to be Neuvilette. Hydro is just too good when it comes to the variety of teams you can build with this element, especially since Neuvilette will probably be able to function in almost every single meta team comp, ranging from international all the way to Nilobloom. And sure, I can understand that shooting a big Hydro Beam of Destruction is not everyone's cup of tea, especially if you keep repeating this over and over the coming years. But the fact that there's a ton of comps that he will potentially be good with, I think he might end up with a good variety of playstyles. Still, I have to give a shout out to Wriothesley. As much as I love the idea of beaming down the foes, there's something amazing about just using bare fists and beating Hilichurls up. I know that Hazo has a similar playstyle, but honestly, the majority of his damage comes from his elemental skill, while it seems like Wriothesley's damage will be be tied to his normal and charge attacks. I just hope he doesn't end up as a slow unit, and by that I mean he doesn't chow down the whole stamina bar while spamming the charge attacks to trigger reactions like melt. All in all, I think this update is pretty amazing if you're looking for a new unique character. Both of these dudes have something fun to offer, but as always, keep an eye on the 4.2 livestream because we are getting closer to the Hydro Archon's release, and I'm very interested to see how much potential she will have. Anyway, thanks for watching the video, make sure to press the like button and subscribe to my channel. Small things like these help my channel survive. Thanks again, and see you next time.